Welcome to the Rolling Forward podcast,
a platform where we talk about all things logistics.
Leading this discussion, you've got Brett and Nathan.
And together, we share a passion for the logistics industry.
Okay, welcome.
Welcome.
Here we are, and we're grateful to have our second guest speaker today, Matthew Hollamby.
Thanks, guys. Thanks very much for the opportunity.
So we've got some word of advice from our podcast director here as well, that not to be monotone and to bring some excitement to the discussion today. So
That'll be easy.
let's do it. Let's jump in. But what I'm going to ask you to do first, Matt, because today I really want to have a futuristic conversation, and I want to leverage off. You've got this fantastic experience in logistics, and you're very passionate. And then Brett equally has got this fantastic experience in logistics, and he is also passionate too.
Yes.
And I just want to see where our conversation goes in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I want to start with, can you just give an introduction for those that don't know the Patrick Terminal? And I know, you'd probably think, who does not know the Patrick Terminal?
A world icon.
Yep. But let's go in there. So just explain the Patrick Terminal, and then just take a couple of minutes. I want you to talk about your journey that's led you to where you are right now in logistics.
Okay, the Patrick Terminal is a 40-hectare facility on Fisherman Islands. It was opened in 2005, so our 20th anniversary.
Yep.
Its claim to fame, in simple terms, is it was the first terminal of its kind in the world to exhibit auto-strad technology. Now, this is technology that Patrick's designed in conjunction with the Centre for Field Robotics at the University of Sydney. So homegrown technology, delivered there, as I say, in 2005. Beyond that, was only the third terminal in the world to embrace automation of any form.
Yep.
So very much the flagship facility for the company at the time. And this technology, as you know, has gone beyond Brisbane to Sydney and several other ports around the world.
Yep.
As to my own story, the second half of your question, I joined the industry in December 1986.
Yep.
I had finished law school. I studied jurisprudence and law. I didn't want to be a lawyer. I wanted to go into the industrial arbitration system. So I took a job as an industrial advocate for the Employers Association that represented shipping and stevedoring companies on the Australian waterfront, a company called the Association of Employers of Waterside Labour. And I worked there for several years. Part of the cadetship I was employed to be a part of involved being deployed to one of the states. I started in Sydney. I'm born and bred in Sydney. So I came to Queensland.
Just like Brett.
Yeah, came to Queensland, worked as a state industrial officer, then went back to Sydney, participated in, what not many people would remember it now, but the Waterfront Industry Reform Authority, which was a Hawke government initiative to reform the Australian waterfront. So I was involved in that, worked closely with the constituent companies of AEWL, and was ultimately offered a job as the industry moved from industry-based employment to enterprise-based employment. So started with Brisbane Gateway Terminals Limited here in Brisbane, which was ultimately subsumed within what is now the modern Patrick.
Mm-hmm.
So I've worked for Patrick for, a very long time. I'm employee number 4 in the company.
All right.
And the other 3 are either dead or gone. So I'm the last man standing. So that's, and look, I've been here. It's been, it sounds a bit silly, but it's been my life's work. I've been here since I came back to Brisbane in April 1997, and I've had the absolute privilege to be involved in the rollout of automation, the construction of the terminal, alongside some very, very talented people.
Yes.
And it's, as you know, we know each other well. I think there's a great pride amongst the people associated with Patrick's in Brisbane as to what has been achieved.
Yeah. Which
Certainly, it's an excellent and deals with Australian trucks really well.
Yeah, it's an Australian system. Yeah.
That landside interface is second to none.
Well, it's a good point. I don't want to jump ahead, but there are different ways of skinning the cat. Automation can be done in a number of different ways, and I think it is important to note that the automation that was developed at Patrick's here was specifically designed to deal with multi-rig vehicles.
That's right.
It does so,
which was ahead of its time.
Well, multi-rig vehicles have always been a feature of you were involved in multi-rig vehicle deployment in Australia. But as you know, Nathan, if you go to Europe, it's one box, one truck. So other forms of automation aren't as necessarily as agile, perhaps, in dealing with those multi-rig vehicles.
Well, don't have the flexibility which the Patrick system has, which is,
Great.
really good.
So what's your tenure in years at the moment with Patrick's?
38, 39, 38.
And you've got...
in the industry, in the industry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you got Ken that's up there quite a bit as well, isn't he?
Yeah, we have an employee, he won't mind me nominating him, Jeff Cook, one of our clerks.
Is that 45?
50 years.
50
years.
He's heading up for his 51st year. Started as a very young fellow up at Maritime Wharf, where our conventional stevedoring operations were.
Yeah.
And still, a very efficient and proud and dedicated member of the Patrick clerical staff at Fisherman Islands.
Yeah, great.
It's amazing. That's incredible. So as we lead into the next question, I'll ask you to just pull your mic a little bit closer so we can just hear your passionate voice, just that little bit extra. Before we go into futuristic, I want to reflect on the late 90s and the early 2000s because there were some amazing things that happened at that point in time. It came from pain, and oftentimes evolution comes from pain as well. But there were some amazing things that occurred at the Port of Brisbane via the Patrick Terminal, which has shaped this region. It supported Australia, and it's also, placed a platform in other global parts of the world too. Can you reflect and talk us through what happened there?
Well, a range of things happened in the late 90s, in the 90s, generally speaking. I mean, most people would, I suppose, what comes to mind immediately is the 1998 waterfront dispute. Very unpleasant for everybody involved. There had been a process of trying to achieve change on the waterfront for some time before that. 1998, I suppose, was a moment where it all came together. So some of the archaic work practices were removed from the industry. There was ultimately a settlement, and that settlement underpins the modern Patrick. There's a tendency to focus on that too much, and I really want to make the point that the history of the Australian waterfront shouldn't be seen through the prism of 1 month in 1998.
Yeah.
There's plenty of fantastic things that have been done either side.
Yeah.
We don't dwell on 1998, although the reality of life is it does underpin
the future,
the modern waterfront.
Yeah.
Other things that perhaps aren't as immediately apparent to people outside the industry that are of great importance, particularly on the land side, was the advent of vehicle booking systems.
Yeah.
So you've had the benefit of going around the world, and you'd know that the truck terminal interface in many countries is very much second fiddle to the seaward interface, the servicing of the ships.
Yeah.
Indeed, I've been to places overseas, modern first world terminals, where the road transport are very much second-class citizens. They don't feature very much in the thinking of the terminal in terms of design and how it's handled and all the rest of it. Full focus is on the ships. That is manifestly different in this country.
Yeah.
So the road transport advocates and what have you have always, passionately put their point. So this all started in Victoria. Fun fact, when I did my digression actually. Fun fact, when I did my master's degree in logistics at RMIT, I wrote my thesis on vehicle booking systems. So I've got sort of a strangely odd interest in vehicle booking systems.
Yeah.
So it started in Victoria. And it started, importantly, because people were just sick of the queues. There were queues that were, like a shift of a queue.
Mindless queues.
Mindless queues. And I mean, of course, the rhetoric was that people were making more money out of demurrage than they were, anything else type thing. So there was this this enormous inefficiency in the truck terminal interface.
Yeah.
So the parties got together, and I think this is of critical importance because the parties solved the problem. Yes, there had been an inquiry, the Morris inquiry into shore-based shipping costs in, 1984, but it was the parties themselves, the road transport operators and the stevedores, who got together in Victoria, a working party, and said, there's got to be a better way of doing this.
Yeah.
That was the genesis of the vehicle booking systems that subsequently spread to Sydney and then Brisbane.
See, I find this, sorry to interrupt, but I find this interesting because, I wasn't around for this time.
You wouldn't have been born, would you?
No. Not for, 6 years old, but I was born in 92. And so you know, I find these discussions quite interesting because you guys have lived it, seen it. And, you know, from my perspective, I only know the efficient side.
Well, it was hideously inefficient.
Yeah, I hear that, but I didn't experience it.
No, the important point to note, and I'm sure Brett will attest to this, this was an example of the industry, the players in the industry, resolving their own problems.
Yep, that's good.
It wasn't sort of...
Best way to do it, Matt, isn't it?
Yeah, some sort of heavy-handed, you know, government intervention. It was the industry solved its own problems. And I think more than any other port, Brisbane still exhibits that characteristic.
Yeah.
As you know, I mean, if you guys as operators have difficulties, we have our periodic meetings. We're still small enough as a port. Oh, we're a big port, but we're small enough that those personal associations between the people who run the businesses are all very strong. So anyway, so the 90s, back to the 90s, some things that really put Australia in a good place on the world stage in terms of the truck terminal interface had their genesis in the 90s. So industrial reform, structural reform in terms of how you know, the various participants in the supply chain engage with each other, I'd say they're the hallmarks of the 90s that have endured.
And then how did that flow into, you know, doing the trials and working with the university in Sydney as well? And actually adopting the innovation that then prevailed thereon, you know, for your launch in 2005, I think it was.
Well, we were lucky. You might recollect Patrick. In the late 90s, Steve had ordered berths 1, 2 and 3 Fisherman Island.
That's right.
And it was bookended by the grain silos on the upstream side and P&O Ports, which is now DPW, on the downstream side. And we were quite buoyant as a business, but we did a lot of things. We did roll and roll off ships, general cargo, cars, containers. So as you'll understand, if you do a whole range of things, you don't do any one thing in a superlative manner. So we decided we needed to focus. This was, you know, when the industry was moving more to sort of dedicated general cargo facilities, dedicated container terminals, dedicated car precincts and what have you. And at the same time, we wanted to pursue automation. So there was a third terminal in Brisbane in those days, Sealand Container Terminal. It's a one-berth terminal at berth 7, where the DPW gantries are now. And they couldn't make a go of it, and it fell over. So the leader of Patrick in those days, Chris Corrigan, a name that would be familiar to some, most, I would hope, approached the port company and said, can we take the lease on berth 7? We want to use that as a trial site to trial automation. Now, we picked that up in the late 90s, and from about 2000, we essentially did that. We trialled automation. It was effectively a microcosm of the facility you can now visit, the bigger terminal. So we moved 5 machines from Botany up, manual machines, worked with Kalmar, the machine manufacturer, University of Sydney, as I've said. We ran them around trialling, in an embryonic sense, the truck terminal interface, how we engage with the cranes. And the opportunity came up, running out of space at berths 1, 2 and 3, trials going pretty well at berth 7. So the decision was made, and a brave decision, I would say.
Very brave.
Let's throw everything into the automation side of things. So we built a bigger terminal, initially at 7, 8, 9, and progressively moved our business from the manual environment, 1, 2 and 3, into that facility. And then on the 1st of December 2005, declared it open, and away we go. We subsequently built berth 10 in 2009. So once again, there's a lot to be proud of here. The wholesale movement, from one terminal to another, was accomplished without significant disruption to our clients. And to this point about cooperation, you appreciate the gantry cranes are on rails. Okay, so we had to move our gantry cranes from berths 1, 2 and 3 to the new facility. Now, what's in between us? DPW. Very kindly, and with all due legal documentation and what have you, DPW allowed us to jack our cranes off the rails and move them through their terminal to the new terminal. I'm not too sure there's anywhere else in the world where that level of common sense and cooperation for the overall sake of the port could have been achieved. So this has been an amazing journey, and there's so many moments in it that really sort of engender pride in the way not just Patrick's have dealt with it, but the port generally has dealt with this movement to the future. And I see that continuing. I mean, this is very much the port of the future. They're innovative. They've got an eye to how the place is going to look.
Yep.
Their 2060 vision and what have you. And I know you guys do as well, moving to Fisherman Islands.
Well, it's just magnificent. Like there's the land opportunities to expand out and the opportunities to bring larger vessels into this terminal, this port, are all there. So
Yes. Yep, port of the future.
massively, the leading one in Australia. Not the biggest one, but yes.
Well, I mean, ports. We've had this discussion. Ports in Australia, unlike ports in Europe, the ports in Australia don't contest except at the margins. Ports exist in Australia. It's a historical development thing. They exist to service their own hinterland.
Yes.
Now, the good thing about Brisbane is there are thousands of people moving here every week.
Yeah.
Refugees from the southern states.
From the cold.
Yes, from the cold. And that will only be driven forward by the Olympics. I mean, to be honest, try and get a tradesman to do anything. In Brisbane, the point I make is the trades workforce in southeast Queensland's probably not big enough to handle the domestic market.
Yep.
When we start to build Olympic infrastructure, we're going to have to bring trades people in. So once again, for every tradesperson that moves here, there's a fridge and a microwave and a lounge suite. So
that's right.
the stuff that comes in containers. So
That's it.
the simple point is that economic activity in southeast Queensland is on the up.
Yep.
Palpably on the up, and will be for the next foreseeable future. So it's not a glib statement to say that this is the port of the future with plenty of opportunity.
Yep. Marvellous. Thanks for the intro there and the insight.
Was that the introduction? How long have we got?
Let's get into the meat and potatoes now. So I want you guys to really have a dance with your brains. And there's no right or wrong here, but it's what do you see as the future? What's the next 30 years look like? What opportunities are there? What things should industries be chasing down?
I agree with Matt that the growth prospects for Brisbane are strong.
Yep.
Because of weather, land availability, and the Olympics. There is a migration that's happening all the time, whether it's foreign or domestic.
Yeah.
It's just on.
It's a place to live.
Yeah, it's a good place to live.
Yeah.
So whatever that.
Where were you born?
I was born in Brisbane.
Right. Well, the three of us, 2/3 of us are,
Imports.
from imports. And you're fine.
Yeah. But so that underlies it. The other thing is the location of the port. It's out of the city. It's away. That is an inherent advantage as well.
Yeah.
And we've been lucky because of, we've had innovation here in terms of automation. So that's given us a great underpinning for the port as well. So there's just so many positives in the port of Brisbane that it's...
the location of the port that can't be understated.
No.
So prior to the advent of Fisherman Islands, the port was at Hamilton. It's progressively moved down the river as ships have got bigger. Can you imagine if we were trying to conduct the trade of southeast Queensland through wharves at Hamilton?
Yeah.
Right? We would seriously be constrained.
Yep.
So the vision that went into creating Fisherman Islands in the 70s and 80s was nothing short of spectacular.
Yeah.
So to Brett's point, the good citizens of Wynnum, there is a sensible divide between them and the port.
Yeah, that's right.
There is no encroachment on the port.
Yep.
We don't have, the equivalent of the Westgate Bridge and, a river passage in Melbourne. We've got the Bay Islands that provide a sheltered anchorage, which other ports don't have. So, I'm not demeaning those other ports. They've all got their selling features. But Brisbane, you would have to say it was visionary to move to Fisherman Islands.
Yeah.
It also, we've had this discussion before, it also enables port-centric logistics to be practiced.
Yep.
So two models of port development, port-centric logistics, everything is co-located, as it is at Fisherman Islands, or an inland port concept where you need to distribute the cargo out generally via rail to distribution hubs.
Yep.
Okay. The value of Fisherman Islands being an exercise in port-centric logistics is the island is effectively hermetically sealed. You can determine what happens on Fisherman Islands.
Yep.
So just as we have, for instance, triple trailer trucks, I saw yours the other day, that would be very difficult to deploy in other Australian ports.
Yep.
Similarly, if I had to pick the port that will first move to the autonomous handling of cargo via, automated trucks, it'll be Fisherman Islands.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, its structural form, if you like, allows for innovation, is a perfect testbed for innovation.
Yeah, because it doesn't obstruct from the general public going down, but it doesn't actually attract it because it is off.
It's off out of the way.
It's right on the east coast, and it's out of the road per se. At least you've got that more controlled environment to do those assessments.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want you to share some stats that you'd already pre-prepared, Matt. We're talking about the vision that went into creating Fisherman's Island in the 70s.
Yep.
And that was only in a short space of time when talking about actual container logistics as a innovative trade in the general scheme of things. And you've got some impressive stats.
Innovation that's happened in the whole seafront logistics space over the last 50, 60 years is impressive.
Well, I just think it's worth remembering how quickly this industry moves because to some observers, the less enlightened observers, it appears nothing changes.
Yeah.
So let's just reflect on this. The very first container ship was a converted oil tanker called the Ideal X that moved 58 containers between two American ports in 1956.
Yeah.
So first ship has a TEU capacity of 58. All right, 69 years ago. What's the biggest ship in the world today now, Nathan?
24,000.
24,000. So we've gone from, a TEU capacity, of next to nothing, 58, to 24,346, the MSC Irina class of vessels. Similarly, Google would suggest that there are now 65 million containers
circulating
in the world.
Yes.
So think about it. In less than 100 years, this has gone from zero to changing the world we live in.
Yeah.
So importantly, we come to think about the future here. I'm of the view that this mechanism of carriage, that the container has proven so, extraordinarily successful that I don't see that changing. And I suspect you guys don't either.
No, we don't.
So I think in 50 or 60 years' time, we'll still be dealing with containers.
Yeah.
Australia being an island, we'll still be dealing with ships.
Yes.
We'll still be requiring some mechanism to get cargo out to distribution centres. So the tasks will remain the same. How they are performed and the means by which they are performed, I think that's the interesting discussion. And the obvious one is automation of road transport and things like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, I can presuppose the answer. With the automation of road transport interfacing with your terminal, does anything need to change, or how do you see that, taking place potentially inside your facility?
No, the short answer is nothing really needs to change.
It's already set up, isn't it?
Yes, the flexibility of, automation has moved on at pace, all right? So the flexibility and the agility of automated vehicles are such that they won't have any difficulty reversing. They'll reverse better than a lot of your drivers, no disrespect. I still think there will need to be, a sensible division between terminal, plant, and truck.
Yep, which is what you have.
Yeah.
And, why would that necessarily change? If it isn't broke, don't fix it type thing. So I see us putting boxes on trucks. The only thing will be, it'll be an autonomous vehicle.
Yeah.
Now, I suppose that leads to a broader discussion. I think the first iteration of that will be movement around Fisherman Islands.
Yes.
Yep.
But then in the longer term, I think we'll see these vehicles on Queensland roads. Now, you've had the benefit of going to Europe where a first step in this is the platooning of vehicles.
Yeah.
Where the first truck may well have a driver.
Yeah.
But, daisy chained, as they say, or, linked behind it are a number of other
autonomous
vehicles that then follow in this big road train sense. Don't tell me we won't see that on the Bruce Highway, in years to come.
We've had discussions before where we can see that playing out between our two depots, running between our Brisbane operation and between our Toowoomba operation. We see that is a real plausible topic for the future.
Yeah, but think about this too, Nathan. What's driving that? There seems to be, at one level in society, there's a demonisation of automation. But the reality of life is, I'm sure your truck driver workforce, good people though they are aging.
Yep.
There's not a lot of kids leave school now and go, I want to be a truck driver, which I find insulting really because it's a good profession. But that's the reality of life. So all transport companies, as I understand it, are struggling to get enough drivers.
That's right.
Now,
and that's where the platooning supports the situation where, we've got a rising freight task.
Right, it's going to go to, according to the port, go to something like 5 million containers by 2060. So that's a hell of a lot of trucks.
Yeah.
So I suppose you've got two choices. We either sort of, try and find a workforce to drive the trucks in the conventional sense, or we move to automation. It's a bit like the agricultural industries. It's very hard to get people to engage in some of those.
Yep.
So what have they done? They've very cleverly introduced automation into some of the agricultural tasks.
Which supports their labour.
Supports their labour. The alternative is the work doesn't get done. So far from demonising automation, we need to start to see automation as the thing that's going to power Australian industry and actually allow us to keep moving forward. I never see a world or a logistics process that is personless. So these sort of, scare doomsayers that, it'll be completely empty. There'll never be a completely empty container terminal. You need people, okay? But, automation will augment the operation. So in a manner that makes it, quite reliable and process-focused.
In terms of the stevedoring operation, Matt, can you just run us through where Patrick's is at in terms of automation and what's left? What's on the table still to do?
So we've essentially resolved horizontal transport, as you know. So the automated straddle carriers service both the hook and the road transport. So all horizontal movement of containerised cargo is autonomous. We have a crane now, our crane 4, the semi-automated crane, where the arc is partially automated and the driver is performing the fine positioning. Importantly, that crane is also remotely driven. So the driver is not actually in a cabin on the
They're
crane.
in the tower, aren't they?
Yeah, subject to the G-forces and funnel smoke and other environmental factors there, sitting at a remote control operator station back in the tower. Now, I can't predict the future for stevedoring, but I would think, not talking about Patrick's necessarily, but I would think the worldwide trajectory towards the remote control operation of cranes. So you won't have people sitting on the crane, you will have them sitting at a ROS desk. Okay? Which is altogether better ergonomically perhaps and all the rest of it. Don't forget, you've been to our place, Nathan, several times. To get from our crib room down to our, upstream crane is a kilometre. So you've got to get people to work. So I think the notion of driving cranes from a ROS desk has significant benefits.
And, even if we go to the very extreme on the rarity side of things, but sometimes you see scenarios where vessels come in contact with the actual berth, and in some cases, they come in contact with cranes and pull them down.
Not in Australia.
No, not in Australia, I'm just saying.
But there's no end of YouTube videos you can watch them.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. On the dramatic, it happens in the world sometimes, on the rare side. But right there where you've got someone remotely in another location that aren't, up high in a gantry, you've taken that safety component away.
I can tell you, if there's one thing our company has done well and puts an enormous amount of effort into, and quite rightly so, is health and safety. You asked earlier about changes on the waterfront. Changes from, say, the 90s or when I joined in the late 80s. The most profound of those changes has been the way in which we address occupational health and safety. And I know you guys have done the same thing. It's as people are fond of saying, it's a license to operate. Without a commitment to health and safety, you may as well give it away. So, but yes, you're right. I mean, we see an automated crane as delivering a whole range of benefits, and one of those is obviously, we say our operations are safe now, driving manual cranes, but if you can improve things, if you can enhance the health and safety and the ergonomic, efficiency of what you're doing, that's a noble cause.
Okay. Vessels, are you hearing much about the future? This potentially could be 10, 20 years away, but are you hearing much from actual vessel operators about the topic of sustainability and any practices that they're pursuing?
Yes, but then the whole supply chain is embracing a greening of its operations, for want of a better phrase. Most certainly Patrick's. So you'd be aware that some of the shipping lines are trialling ethanol-powered vessels. There are other mechanisms. So it's very much on their radar.
Yep.
A few years ago, they had to give up emitting, I think it was sulphur and what have you. So, yeah, very much the case. But as I say, that is, a part of the supply chain generally. I mean, we use diesel-electric straddles, which are quite efficient from an emissions point of view.
Yep.
But our next tranche of straddles, I think, invariably will be electric. Yep. And we've been overseas and spoken to people, and certainly there are plans for that. Yes.
Yep. Okay. Any lasting comments there, Brett, about what you're hoping or seeing for the future?
We've got constrained or contained environments that suits the electric thing down to the ground. Where you've got big distances, that electric probably doesn't provide a great solution. But I mean, we're very keen on electric vehicles, and that where it's possible to use them, like lightweight empties, also short last mile deliveries, for example, where you just don't need a diesel truck to do the job. So
yeah.
What about hydrogen? Do you see hydrogen having a future?
I think so, Matt.
It's got the grunt, hasn't it?
The longer distance,
yeah.
Effectively, when you think about what a battery is like a fuel tank.
Yep.
If you know what I mean. But it's bloody expensive fuel tank.
Yeah, my word.
And one that needs a lot of rare earths and things to make run, whereas hydrogen would be like diesel. The energy would go into a tank.
Yeah.
So it's the same sort of concept. So that allows us to get long distance. So I think, yes, hydrogen does. The uncertainty I've got with hydrogen is about how we create hydrogen in a sensible way with not a huge amount of energy required to make the hydrogen. Yeah, because you've got to look at the whole life cycle to work out whether hydrogen might be not doing any emissions at the point of truck.
Yeah, but the generation
before.
Yeah, I mean, it's self-defeating.
It is. Yeah. So that's the challenge. So it's
we're all going to have to move that way.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, in a perfect world, people like yourselves who embrace that. I mean, in my view, there should be some, I don't know, what could you say, a rebate on your registration or something. There should be active incentives for transport operators to move in that direction.
Yeah. Our push is very much about, we don't look much on the subsidy side, but we're more interested in what the customer wants.
Oh, good point. Yeah,
that's our approach.
Yeah.
That means the uptake might be a bit slower than it would be with some assistance, but we know people want to work in an environment that's lower, a lower emissions base. So we're going to give them that option.
Yeah,
that's sort of our approach.
I guess there's two different approaches there. There's that approach which is the early adopter, the innovator, and listening for what are people desiring, what not. And then on your side, it's like, well, for the ones that aren't those early adopters, how is the government going to support and push them along and get them there faster? And that's where, as you said, potentially some subsidies on registration and whatnot could come into play.
You hasten to say, I think the market is the best mechanism. I mean,
that is, yeah.
And you see it now. Forget about logistics for the moment, but in society more broadly, shareholder, I don't want to say activism, but shareholder arguments for companies to be greener.
Yeah. No, exactly.
Yeah. All right. I think we're done.
We're done. I haven't even got to airships. Can't I talk about airships for a moment? I want to talk about hydrogen.
There's no time for airships.
Come on. No, transport of the future. Seriously, 30 seconds or less.
Go again.
You know what an airship is, right? Everybody's got the sort of regrettable memory of the Hindenburg, which is the worst piece of footage. Yeah, but an airship filled with helium.
Yes.
Okay, and they are deploying them around the world. So we're on the cusp of a renaissance in airships. Don't tell me we wouldn't be able to move a wind turbine blade more efficiently from here to Dalby with an airship.
Yeah.
Also, when the port talk about the cruise terminal, imagine cruising in an airship over the barrier reef. All right.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
Yeah. Fun fact. I mean, some people are interested in trains. I've always had an interest in airships, but I think I'll live to see them come back and play some role in the transport sector.
Yeah. Right.
Yes.
Nice.
There we are. On that note.
That's it. I like that. On that note, let's give it a wrap. Thank you, Matt, for joining us today.
Absolute pleasure, guys.
And genuinely, thank you for the collaboration that both our organisations have together. As you said at the start, we're fortunate that this environment we're in down at the Port of Brisbane, everyone gets along. It doesn't mean that everyone has enjoyable conversations all the time, above all,
We're not afraid to have the hard conversations.
we're not afraid to have
and they're done politely and professionally.
Yeah.
And that makes it easy.
Yeah, and it's all to support our importers and exporters.
Yeah,
So,
indeed.
yeah, love the work. Thank you very much.
All right.
Have
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank
Good
you.
on you, lads.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to our podcast, Rolling Forward.
We love sharing content for the logistics industry, so please also connect with us on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Instagram.